Tens of thousands of football fans came to Highbury. Electrifying.
Yes, guys. Yes, guys. Welcome back to the instant reaction. Newcastle 2, Arsenal 0 out of the Carabao Cup at St James's Park in a pulsating victory for Newcastle away. Can we just cut to the chase? What a weird season this is. The highs of Sunday, the lows this evening. Just saying to George off air, like, I think I'd kind of written this game off, and the closer we were getting, because George was quite sort of positive about it, I was like, oh, maybe we could do it. Maybe we could do it. Maybe there's something. And then like the sort of half an hour before, I'm going, do you know what? I'm feeling something tonight. I'm feeling something, and I'm going, right, I'm up for it. And that first Isak goal gets ruled out, and I'm thinking, oh Jesus, we're gonna break it down. Yeah, hang in there with us. It's a tough evening. Another tough game where it's St James's Park. Arsenal obviously out of the Carabao Cup. The good news is, George, Dubai beckons.
Yeah, clearly
beckons.
Clearly Dubai is the answer to all problems.
Go on, mate.
No, I don't know, mate. Like, it's difficult because I feel like when you go from one of the best performances of the season to one of the worst performances of the season, it's just an extremist view where you're never going to get something in the middle between. There was a period that this could be a takeoff point, and then this is a really low point. Because for me, what frustrated me was from minute one, and it's I don't know. I'd like to talk about some players if we can, respectfully, because there's some consistency in terms of who can show up at St. James's Park and what type of game these same players seem to struggle in. And for all the talk, I do think that Eddie Howe has something over Mikel in terms of how he's able to consistently drag out performances. I mean, there's teams that show up for other teams, and Newcastle is just one of those teams that I think always shows up against Arsenal. But we don't help ourselves. And like a lot of this performance for me, there was a lot of Alexander Isak talk, but I'm looking at it. Saliba, really horrific performance. Really bad. Thomas Partey, really poor. Martin Odegaard, really poor. I thought Timber had a really tough match. Somebody that is so strong defensively 1v1 was having a real tough time with Gordon. And the whole right-hand side, the whole high-touch players were really, really poor with every single one of those touches. And I think we had no composure in our build-up. The goal on David Raya is just bemoaning to me. As a midfielder, if you've ever played and you receive that from your goalkeeper, you're killing them. They have the entire...
He never does that. And of course it was in this fixture. He never does that.
But that's kind of my point. Like, a lot of our technical leaders completely failed. And it's really frustrating because then I look at the Hale End boys and, I was trying to tweet because I always try to tweet positively after a match, no matter when we win or we lose. And all I could say was that the Hale End boys did really well. And I thought Calafiori had a good cameo.
Yeah, looked decent at right back, didn't he? Yeah, that's all right.
Yeah, and he had a good cameo. And then beyond that, there's nothing. And look, it's frustrating because I think we as fans, we see the rivalry that we have with Newcastle. We want to see fight on the pitch. And I hope we can have an honest Odegaard discussion. Odegaard discussion.
Look, George, Mikel took him off at 60 minutes. I think that tells you something.
Well, I think it should tell us more that your captain in a semi-final after 60 minutes is being hooked like that for something that hasn't been just a one-game performance. Odegaard hasn't been good all season. And for as much as we want to justify and provide context, there's a consistency that whenever we face a physical mid-block, Martin Odegaard is somebody that struggles to influence the game. Unless he is coming back and in the middle third, that's where he likes to be. It's where he finds comfort. And as soon as you put him high up the pitch, he is unable to receive under pressure release with a consistent pass in the final third. He's not able to do that. The composure in the final third is really poor. He's not able to hold on to the ball with the same authority. He's not able to break with the same authority. And, I thought Kai Havertz, I know everybody wants to hold back on trying to have some criticism there, but I thought, again, another really poor performance. And what frustrates me...
I don't think anyone wants to hold back.
Well, no, like in the sense that people want to hold back because, he's been through a lot of minutes and we only have him as a striker there. But, I mean, he's been really poor. And these are two players that this team has platformed. and we've platformed up, and they haven't shown up, not just in this game. It's been a consistent thing, I'd say, for almost 2 months. We've struggled to see performances from these guys. And the one thing is, I have a look at the team. Who are some of the new leaders within the team? Thomas Partey, I thought, went from one of his best performances of the season to one of his worst performances of the season in back-to-back games. And it's not enough for your technical leaders to so consistently fail in the same game state. So you're sitting there, and this is why I keep asking for a different attacking identity. I think that we are developing new players within this team. But for me, fundamentally, to have your worst performance of the season on a semifinal that you were looking to have some fight and build off one of the best performances that you've had over the weekend in the Premier League is disappointing. It's a gut punch, and you're sat there saying it's not good enough, and you're frustrated because I don't think it's a lack of want. I mean, the players were clearly upset with themselves. There's a lot of frustration boiling over. I look at Rice. I've never seen him lunge and do a tackle like he did on Bruno Guimaraes in the second half, and here he is doing it. Like, there's a lot of frustration happening there, but it's frustration of our own accord. And, I'm really annoyed that a lot of the topic will be Isak and it's over, when really we shat the bed in the first minute. Our buildup was disgusting. Our composure in the press was disgusting. These are our identities, and we didn't do the basics to earn the right to play. And we haven't seen it from the leadership group that I would expect, especially our technical leaders. This isn't a physical issue. This isn't a physical duel issue. This is, do we consistently step up in difficult physical mid-block games? Do we bring the technical consistency that's required? And I don't know if we do, and I find that annoying. I find that pretty pathetic, to be honest with you, and I'm just really deflated about the manner that we've lost this game, because I think it's one of our worst, if not our worst, performances so consistently.
Let's go through each individual that you kind of raised there at some point. I don't, I think we should come to that. You maybe sort of alluded to it there, and I don't necessarily, it depends what you mean, but I'm going to make this point, maybe see if we disagree on this. I do think at some point you can draw a line under this game and look at the way Isak dealt with the ball on the first goal for Jacob Murphy, and look at the way he dealt with Saliba, and at some point say, we don't need to learn this lesson over and over again. We don't need to overthink it. We need to add that level of quality. And do you know what it is? We've added physical freaks everywhere in the team, except basically probably Kai Havertz. I mean, you could probably argue Saka in a sense, but in terms of the forward signings, Jesus maybe, I don't think he was ever a physical freak. He had a burst, but we haven't added something there. Trossard is technically brilliant, but he's not a physical freak. Sterling is certainly not a physical freak. I mean, I've seen bowling pins with more sturdiness than Sterling's. Like, do you know what the problem is with Sterling as well? And one of the many issues with him, if he plays on the inside, I don't mind you playing on the inside, but if you receive the ball inside and you can't hold on to it because you can just be pushed off the ball, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you go and stand in there. I'd rather you go out on the left and just hang out there, because you can't receive on the inside. It doesn't matter. And it's the one place that we haven't signed, in my opinion, enough physical freaks. We've done it with Calafiori and White and Rice and Marino and whatever, but in front areas, that was a really thing that stood out to me this evening. And we don't need to learn this again. We see this with Isak. We can understand that this is a freak. We see that. Look, whether that's the right player for us or not, I don't know. I absolutely love the player, and we can have that debate, whatever. But we haven't done that in those forward areas. But maybe let's draw a line under that, because there's not really much fodder there for an instant reaction to talk about that. We know Isak is exactly the sort of player. Don't you think that's a
story, though, more in the first leg? Like, I look at this performance, and especially in this leg, like this actual instant reaction, like the first 25 minutes, that has nothing to do with Alexander Isak being good. It had everything to do with Saliba shitting the bed. It had everything to do with Timber.
I disagree, mate. I honestly, like, I think look, Saliba maybe wasn't at his best, but if we isolated Saliba versus Isak, I guarantee you 8 out of 10 times Saliba probably does enough. I'm not saying he absolutely dominates him, but does enough.
I really disagree with that.
No, fair enough. But hang on. But the 2 times that Saliba, that Isak does beat him out, it leads to something. And that's the crucial part. In that position, you have to win every single battle. And ultimately, Isak wins the crucial ones. Look, in the end, we know the talent level that we need to add to that forward line. And that's what I'm looking at with Isak. So it's not even, we could talk Šeško, we could talk whoever. Let's come to our players. Let's go through sort of individually.
Timber versus Anthony Gordon was not a battle that we won. Yeah, that wasn't a battle that we won whatsoever. And I really disagree on Saliba. I think he's had consistent games. Isak and Saliba don't do well, and Gabriel had a much better game today of the two center backs. Saliba, I thought, lost 8 out of the 10 duels with Isak. Was all over the shop. Was misjudging things. Even in terms of some of his back passes, they were just very, very poor. I thought he had a really bad game today. He had a really bad day at the office. And I don't think it's because Alexander Isak is more physical than Saliba. Saliba has done it against more physical strikers. My problem is that I think the right-hand side as a duo really failed to win their duels. And they also had really poor decisions building out from the back. Raya's passes were slow to reach out to Timber, but again, they were turning into trouble, and there was a lot of pirouetting by Timber in high areas when we really just needed some simple decisions and simple passes into play. Thomas Partey wasn't helping, so the first ball out from that build-up was really difficult for him to control and make good decisions. And so from the first 20 minutes, I maintain, I'd love to see the stats. I don't think that Arsenal had a consistent build-up sequence in the first 20 to 25 minutes. And I think our press was all over the shop. I looked at our distances between defense and attack, and our press was pretty much non-existent from my perspective. And when Odegaard was dropping in because we were having so much difficulty in build-up, it meant that Kai Havertz was going deep and Raya was going long to no one. So it was just a tactic for me that fell apart. I don't know, specifically for me, the back line had a real big issue, and especially Saliba had a really poor performance today. I think Timber had a poor performance. The whole right-hand side was really struggling, and the left just wasn't accessed, so it's difficult for me to really comment on it, but we didn't play to the left once, really. I don't know, because our biggest technical leaders in Raya, Timber, Saliba, Odegaard, Partey, all had really bad games for me. And I think the other people in the team just didn't get the ball enough and had passable games, which weren't even good. But the only one that I can highlight in the back line, again, I think Gabriel did well in certain moments in his duels. And I think Miles Lewis-Skelly did very well, and especially had composure in higher areas and was actually feeding people between the lines. So Miles Lewis-Skelly had a really good performance. But other than that, I think from a back line, I thought Raya struggled, didn't get control. I think the Declan Rice goal wasn't the only mistake that he made. He was delaying his passes, not being authoritative with it. And I think he had the space of kind of the pitch to look at. And I just don't understand why he goes along when Kai Havertz isn't there. Kai Havertz is pulling out to the right to fill in the space that Martin Odegaard drops to. And we have no one competing in the center backs up top, and he's going long. And that for me is just returning the ball back to Newcastle. And we just, I don't think we had any composure in those first 20 to 25 minutes. The response after the goal for me was pretty good for about 7 or 8 minutes. But then other than that, kind of lulled ourselves into a really poor performance of going through the motions, to be honest with you.
So look at the numbers. Newcastle 2-0, 1.6 expected goals to our 1.5, 10 shots to our 11, 3 shots on target each, 68% possession for us, 450 passes to their 212, triple their final third entries, quintuple their expected threat. Many times extra their deep touches, many times extra their zone 14 touches. Another sort of dominant performance, probably what you're talking about there in terms of the quality in those early areas. I think we just allowed it to become a basketball game, and then they scored, and then they were happy for us to take over.
Do you know that jump? Do you know which one that is? And I think this is a talking point.
This one here?
Yep.
I don't imagine this one.
Martin Odegaard.
No, because the Odegaard one happened before the goal. So that will be the Odegaard one. I don't know what that one is.
Okay. For me, when we're discussing a poor match where we started poorly and you're through on goal like that and you're already down 2-0, and you receive it in space, it's difficult. That's where I can sit there and I can say, look, it's very frustrating. You have an Alexander Isak, he puts that away. That I'm fine with. If we created 3 or 4 or 5 of those opportunities, I'm with the forward claims. But that was the only time in the match that we threatened Newcastle remotely. Maybe there was a header with Miles Lewis-Skelly towards the end with Declan Rice, in which he can maybe do better in the 6-yard box. But beyond that, those were your 2 moments that we even had maybe a sniff at Newcastle's goal. So for me, that's not a forward generating issue. This team just wasn't able to be creative in this match. And a lot of it for me had to do with the press, which was non-existent. I don't think we had a very good press at all. I'd be interested to see the running numbers in this match. Yeah,
that was available. I mean, the only pushback I'd give is there's basically no XG jump for that Isak chance, which he creates off the shoulder. And that's the physicality that I'm talking about, that burst and that venom in the shot. That's what I'm looking for. There's a shot maps in terms of where the goals and shots were coming from, which you're going to look at. And there is a field tilt door, which goes to us. I mean, I guess where a lot of the frustration comes from is that this feels a lot like the story of our season, where we do a lot of this. We have a lot of the final third touches and the entries and all that good stuff that we love, right? But can't make it count, which is the frustration. Let's come to some super chats. Mafio says, I swear we're not winning anything this season. It's looking unlikely. Daniel says, therapy dues. Thank you, Daniel, for paying your therapy dues. Anthony B says, I've concluded that at most elite level matches, Odegaard doesn't have the quality to take hold of a game. The pattern is very clear, unfortunately. I think that moment where he misses that chance is kind of sums up Odegaard. Because actually in the sequence before, it's on UK TV, Gary Neville's highlighting him, so this is probably specifically why it's in my mind, but he's beginning to drop in. He's beginning to knock the ball around. He sort of gets us out of a couple of situations. He gets forward, he gets into the box, and he misses that chance. And I don't think he has the physical thrust. I don't think he has the timing in his actions. I don't think he has the clinicalness, basically, to be someone who, in the construct of that midfield, we expect goals from. If you're looking at the construct of that midfield with Partey, Rice and Odegaard, someone has to score goals from that midfield, and not just from late arrivals. Someone has to be the person in the box scoring the goals, and he isn't good enough to do that. I think that's a big problem for me.
Okay, I don't know. Maybe in the meantime, I think Scott Willis actually quotes the chance, and I don't know if we can show it on here, but I think the big thing is if we're gonna admit that we're moving forward as a team. And Mikel has spoken specifically about Martin Odegaard being closer to goal and operating more as a true 10. Like, if we're looking towards that being the demand as a role, okay? And that's what we need from him moving forward, right? When he's in those spots, do we consistently enough, not just in this game, because it's not fair to sit there and pick apart one moment, one shot, but do you find confidence of him in those positions consistently enough to finish? And I think when I'm sat there having a look at this sequence, I'm frustrated because I'm not confident that he finishes these chances consistently enough. And, I think we can make up some excuses, but fundamentally, when you're talking about moments, talking about a number 10 providing output, these are glorious opportunities. And again, mate, like, this is 0-0. Like, this is the tie for quite a bit of the performance, in the sense of we've lost the first 15 minutes. You've got a break on goal. This is right before the Isak goal. This is how you turn games that are going against you. And I'm wondering, how many times do we see Martin Odegaard do that against physical mid blocks? I don't think we see it enough. We see him clear other game in other game states, but as far as physical mid blocks go, and in terms of his ability to create output and change games in transition in those moments, that's something that he consistently struggles with. And yeah, I don't know if I can, if I feel comfortable saying, like, this is okay consistently enough, because it's not just this moment. Kai can have this moment. Do our central players put these chances enough away? They don't. And we don't get anybody that digs us out of a poor performance like that. So it's frustrating. But if we're talking about a future midfield, mate, like where we're looking at our number 10 to operate more as a traditional number 10, I think we have to start asking the question if we can see enough sample of him doing that over the course of 90 minutes across every single game.
Has Mikel's number? Odegaard gave it to him, says Joel. Elisa says, frontline needs investment. We must move on from Odegaard. Lacks the dynamism required from the fourth attacker and limits ability in transitions. I think that's basically exactly it. He's a brilliant dictator from deep. I think he's brilliant in terms of in that middle third, pushing us up the pitch. But also, again, it's like, to take away Odegaard, you're taking something away and you're adding something. And what are you willing to give up in this team? What are you willing to add to this team? Do Arsenal have a problem getting up the field? Do Arsenal have a problem finding themselves in the final third? No. And I don't think this third player in the midfield who might replace Odegaard would massively scupper us and take something huge away at this point. We don't have that issue. The issues that Elisa's kind of outlined there, I think, are the ones. George Dimmy says, clock, we probably need an attacker. Shame we just found out today.
15 million would cripple our season, right?
It would. If only people had been calling for an attacker. It's a real shame we've just mentioned that today, isn't it, George? Really interesting.
One thing I think Mikel deserves some serious criticism for, though, is, again, I don't know why Jorginho didn't start this match. I could probably understand post 5-1, as a coach, you're saying, I'm not going to change anything because you've had such a great performance. That logic I can understand. But when you so consistently see Jorginho fare well against Newcastle as an opponent that you traditionally struggle with, that's something that I didn't understand. And I understood even less how late he was introduced. I mean, it was clear that there was an issue in terms of us controlling our buildup. So I don't understand why we didn't see him a little bit sooner.
Jay, but Alex, Arteta is the greatest coach of all time. I suspect this might be sarcasm. But thanks for the super chat. The board threw this season away, fuming with them. Yeah, we discussed this on our transfer live stream, which you can go check out from transfer deadline day, which was 2 days ago, Monday. Reece says, without top forwards, you leave the game way more to chance. Odegaard must score. Kai happy to try for a foul and shoot. KSC to blame for a poor season. Well, yeah. I don't know if this is what you're saying, Reece, but I don't think you could put all the blame on anyone. But I think it has to be rightly attributed and attributed around the team and around as many people we need to look at as possible. There's someone on Arteta, there's someone on the players, there's someone the Cronkies, there's someone Win and Gunnosaurus, I'm sure. But I think, as we've discussed many times around this window, like there's nothing new to say, and this is why I look at Isak, and it does frustrate me, and that is where I look at this game and I say it's the perfect summation. The Arsenal hierarchy can't surely watch that game and not think that is the area to look at, and they do. Like, we know they do, but like it's the fact that nothing's been done in 2 consecutive windows. They have to look at themselves at some point. Brownistani says their game plan was better. No need to overanalyze. To be fair, just to credit Newcastle quickly, as well as having, I would say, more talented forwards. They were very brave with what Dan Burn was doing, with him stepping up with the third centre back.
Even Lewis Hall, in terms of him coming inside into midfield, I thought was smart, because that was the duel again, not to isolate him, but against Odegaard. Like, again, that was a way for them to control that area of the pitch so that we couldn't get started. And I think, again, for me, Gordon was incredible. I think Gordon was their best player on the pitch, personally, for me. Not just in terms of what the work that he did out of possession, but even how reliable he was as an outlet. I think was incredible. For me, he was better than Isak for Newcastle. And he was causing us a lot of problems. Again, he was a big reason why we couldn't get going, for me. I mean, it's also, how much do you want to credit this isn't our day versus how much we did this to ourselves as well? Like, I mean, Newcastle had a brilliant performance, but I think today feels like one of those days that you tied your own hands behind your back whilst the opposition took their food, did their chances, and did well with it. You know what I mean? Like, they played well, they did brilliantly, but also we didn't play anywhere near to our potential. And it's really frustrating because I'm really mad with the approach that we had with this game.
Victor says mobile strikers like Isak are an issue for our centre backs. Well, I haven't seen them stretch like that, and I think we sort of discussed the thing I'm impressed by with Isak is his physicality, but specifically in his 1v1s with Saliba, it's his mobility, but more his technicality. I've never seen someone that big with those feet. And that's as simple as it gets. He is, I mean, even when he's in the wide areas, the way he controls the ball from on the byline, like he's just unbelievable. Invincibles 49 TP5 performance will get swept under the rug. The next week, people will be saying, give him a new deal. He's so poor with the duels and second balls, fed up. I've criticised Martin Odegaard, Partey Defence League guys, just to flag this. I've agreed with George on Timber. Declan Rice, I think had it's difficult because he works so hard, but I think he had a poorer game this evening. There was a lot of poor performances, so I'm not picking on Partey. But one of the issues and one of the reasons that I find Partey really hard is if you could almost segment for Arsenal when we're moving through phases. So ball goes wide, okay, we're jumping into our press, or ball's loose, we're trying to counter press, or ball's deep with Raya, we're building up, whatever it is. If you could almost go through the game and like pick the timer up in the left-hand corner and say, right, from this moment to that moment, they were doing this. I guarantee you Partey is second to last or last to jump into the next phase every single time. He's always the last to react, whether it's getting out from a corner, whether it's jumping up to a corner, whether it's jumping in on someone. He's always just the last player to respond through every phase. And Rice is the first, and I love that. And Gabriel's the first, or whoever it might be, or Kai Havertz is the first. It's really frustrating in games like this when you want to bring that intensity and that energy, and you feel like you have someone who's doing the right things, but is just behind the team. I find him brilliant in many ways and frustrating in others. And that's why I can never go fully on the Partey is the answer and the Holy Grail train, to be honest.
There's a difference between the current Partey and the Partey of 2 years ago, right? And I think the Partey of 2 years ago was the best DM in the league for me with Rodri. It was those two. And you could take your pick about stylistic differences, about which you prefer. But the idea of Partey is still one of the best DM profiles that you're going to have. The issue that I'm having is that's not the current Partey, but he's just, I don't know. I'm lamented to talk about those issues today because, I mean, he was poor, but there's some people, like mainly Saliba for me, really disappointed me today. And I am somebody that loves Saliba. I think I would rather talk about his performance more so than Partey for me.
I'd be interested. I think when we do the post-match or whatever, have a watch again. And I will as well. Have a watch again. My instinct is it wasn't as bad as we think. I think he was actually all right, and there was just a few moments that we went, oh God, what's he doing? And that coloured it. I actually think generally he was okay. And I think there's a few moments that stand out, and then we watch it through that lens. I'll watch it again, you watch it again, and we can come back to it. But I that's my instinct on first watch.
Yeah, no, I don't know. I think he was poor. I think he was late to his challenge. I think that when he got a hold of the ball, he was late to release himself. He's the one that sets the tempo in terms of build-up. And he was delaying passes. He was also making some obvious uncomfortable plays. Like, I'm not talking about those, but for me, it was the pace of pass on the build-up and the release of pass was really late from Saliba, which isn't true. My instinct was that he was poor, personally, and he was at fault for a lot. And I think Timber as well. Like, Timber was a shocking one for me because I don't think he's lost many 1v1s. Timber has a long list of people he's locked out 1v1, and Anthony Gordon's not one of them. That was one person that won that battle for me today. And again, it doesn't happen often, but it happened today. So it led to, again, you're looking at Thomas Partey struggling, David Raya, again, another one that struggled. This isn't somebody that I think typically plays a Rice-like pass, but he did today. And it was just all our technical leaders. Again, like, when all of them have a bad game, there's an issue.
Yeah, it's very hard.
And it's hard to do well. Yeah.
I think Timber, again, going off on 78 minutes, whatever it was for Calafiori, I think, again, that just tells you something. I think he is knackered. I'm not saying it was okay, but I think, again, physically, he's massively drained, and I can't wait to have Ben White back. Jake Donovan says Newcastle can lose to random mid-table clubs, but turn into prime Liverpool when we come to town. Energy saved by playing once a week adds up. Yeah, and there was another super chat from someone from Nathan Piper says, "Can we admit the fans shook the team?" That atmosphere and the energy that they create, credit to them. Credit to them. Like we can't look past Eddie Howe's record against Mikel Arteta. The fact that I worry about is at St James's Park, and actually going back to your point about Jorginho from earlier, that's the only time I've ever felt secure in a game at St James's Park when Jorginho was playing. Like, I didn't feel secure because I was watching it and panicking. But if I'd watched it objectively, that game in, was it 23-4? No, it's 22-23, wasn't it? End of 22-23? Can't remember anyway.
Yeah, the year before.
When Jorginho played, that you can't turn it into a basketball game. And actually, I was kind of excited a little bit that I felt a bit like we were leaning into it in the way we were reacting, the actions we were taking. It felt like we were going like, okay, we're actually going to play you at your own game a little bit. I thought it was risky, but fine. But then once they scored, they switched it off, and you just couldn't get it off them. So no.
Look, it's a big atmosphere, but I do think it's consistent. Like, look at the first leg as well. We started poorly in the first leg as well, in the first 10, 15 minutes. At St. James Park, I would argue consistently in the first 15, 20 minutes, Arsenal have lost every single game for the last 2 to 3 years in those first 15, 20 minutes. So it definitely plays a factor to it. And I don't think, look, some teams have these bogey teams. Like, I mean, I'm not going to sit there and think that this is an issue for Arsenal long term. Like, we have started brilliantly before in other games. I think Newcastle is an example of a team that we struggle against, and it would be a big reason why we want to bring Zubimendi in to offer a lot of those things and control in those types of games. But again, I will say we need to see a little bit more step up from these technical leaders as a whole, right? And it's not one person to blame when almost 4 or 5 of you are struggling in the match. You know what I mean? Like, this is a collective disappointment. It's not 1 or 2 people that have been poor technically. It's like I said, for me, 4 or 5, and our right-hand side is our technical leaders, and the whole right-hand side didn't turn up. So,
and not only that, getting drawn into what Kieran Trippier was trying to do and getting drawn into the Bruno stuff, and you could feel them. They were taking that bait the more the game went on. And I understand that, I get it, but when it's 80 minutes, fair enough. When it's 60 minutes and you're still in the game, that was frustrating. Jake Price says, you can't take anything from Isak. He was top class. Completely agree. Space Rocky says, Odegaard can't be our fourth attacker going forward. Obviously, we've discussed that a little bit before. Sway says, I can't really rationalize trying to impose control on a game like this, but do we have the forwards to trust to produce from or less structured play? And there was a question as well. Where was it? Something, I can't find it later. Here we go. From Harish, who said, is it just a personnel issue though? Could there be a better tactical approach? The thing is if you, again, people are bored of us saying this, but if you look across the general spectrum of Arteta, our press has been unbelievable, one of the best in Europe. Our off the ball stuff is almost never a problem. Almost never. There's games when it is a problem, but almost never, and there's always games with every manager. Getting to the final third isn't a problem. I even think sometimes, while I worry about our variety in the final third, I think actually this evening there was a lot of central access. I can't look past, if I'm answering that question from Harish about personnel, I can't look past Raheem Sterling receiving it on the inside, unable to create separation. Trossard getting shepherded out to the left-hand side and unable to get himself inside. I can't look past when Kai Havertz is working, what his running brings us. And I can't look past when Saka's working, what he brings us. And a lot of this is physical separation. It's the ability to, what Isak did, get in front of you, knock a ball around the corner, turn around the corner, and somehow pull out a mad weak foot shot that goes onto the post and goes in. And I want to talk tactics in the final third, and we can. And we got stuff wrong this evening. I'm not saying we don't, but until we have those profiles, that's what I'm looking at. Now, does Mikel deserve criticism for not getting those profiles in sooner? That's a different conversation. We could talk about that. But right now, what the issue is, for me, leans heavily into profiles. Heavily.
It's a question that's related. It's not one or the other, because different players let you play differently. And they're one and the same. When you talk about the Isak that allows you to play differently, because do we have enough people to play balls? Well, if we have somebody that we trust to reach those balls, maybe we're more brave to play them, right? Like,
and sorry to cut you off, but in that first goal, the ball Gordon fires into him, it's it's like he like shoots at his thigh because he knows he's got it. It's
yeah. So it's a combination for me of those things. Look, the only thing that I'll say is again, I felt like we didn't do our game plan today, regardless. So when you talk about change and looking forward to the team, that aspect is something that we've covered at length in terms of changing how to change. But when you follow that up with just not doing the things that our game plan respects as well, then there's a lot more to talk about when that type of performance combines both of those things. And the only thing I will say is we do have a tendency to do this against a certain type of opponent, and that is a physical mid-block. That's been the case last year. It is the case this year when you look at Fulham and you look at some other moments where we struggled. It's a very similar game state, right? And I think it's about properly defining what you need in order to exploit areas in the center of the pitch. And that comes from some physical separation things that unfortunately we don't have. But at the same token, we need to do better with a lot of the opportunities that we create and a lot of the basics that we have. We can't, I don't think we can be successful if we have a performance like the first 20 to 25 minutes of this match consistently every game. I'm not confident in our performance of the season. That for me has nothing to do with attack and how we access central areas. That had everything to do with our game plan that we weren't able to impose for me. So
I hear that. I do think it can be both. I think you can cover that with players like Isak. I really think you can. And that's the thing. I hear what you're saying and I agree. But as well, I think you can have a poor 20-25 minutes and you get out of jail with attackers like Isak, and that's what we don't have. David says Trossard injury away from Tierney starting left wing. Yeah, obviously Martinelli went off. I don't think the Martinelli things, it didn't seem too bad.
No. I don't think it's a high risk. But,
pure conjecture, but he's stood up. It looked like he wanted to carry on. They immediately took the decision on Wanyeri. It wasn't like a late decision. They were like, no, we're taking you off. Simon Murphy was testing him. As he walks off, he's like talking to the players, and he didn't seem upset. So look, we've got 10, 15 days or so till our next game. I think he'll be okay. But
I'll do the casual Twitter thing. If he's walking, it's not ligaments.
Yeah, exactly. If he's walking, it can't be anything. Mikel needs to go back and watch the 2023 St James's Park win. Well, certainly with his usage of Jorginho in that game, absolutely. Nathan, we've discussed that. Thank you for your super chat. Thank you all for your super chats. Really appreciate it. Abysmal from the captain says Barracks can't miss that. Poor. Yeah, but it sort of comes back to stuff we said before, and I think something you said earlier. Like, if we're making one clear-cut opportunity, it's sort of like the Martinelli discourse that we have sometimes. It's like, well, yes, he shouldn't miss it, but if you're making one opportunity per game, like it's like, well, it's a frustration. Eshwar, says Mikel's setup is both a strength and a weakness. Our defenders aren't exposed to danger often, unlike Virgil van Dijk and Konate, who thrive in transition battles.
I won't have that. Arsenal are one of the best transition defending teams in the world. We can have a poor day. We can have a day where we didn't defend transitions well today. But as a whole, talking about controlling transitions, Gabriel, Saliba, Declan Rice, that's one of the best controlling transition pods in world football. So
we normally stop transitions with our wingers. That's the issue. That's why we don't look like that, because our wingers stop them. Complacency FC in full effect, says O'Malley. The whole club is in the we'll get them next time mind frame. It's cultural, hence why we don't win big games or sign players. No urgency in play, coaching, or management. I do take this point in terms of the long-term thinking. And I think like the analogy I give is like, you've settled on moving house next year, but the perfect house becomes available next month. Do you do it? And you've got the money, and you've packed up your house. You've settled on, I'm going to do it in 2026, but the perfect house is available for 50k under your asking price, and you don't do it because you'd made that plan. Ultimately, long-termism is lovely. It's a good thing, and generally that is how you should run clubs. And we shouldn't forget that these guys, the Tim Lewises and the Richard Garlicks and the James Kings, these guys have to think longer term. but that has to be balanced out with what the club needs right now. And I think at the moment we've gone a little bit in the same way we've gone too far into order on the pitch as opposed to away from chaos. That we've gone too far into long-termism as opposed to dealing with the issues in the squad right now. We've gone, well, that's going to happen. And the concern is, I've sort of discussing this in a video I'm putting out tomorrow, but on my channel. But we've all got our eyes on Isak, and that's lovely. That is great. But Isak, we might spend 100 and whatever million pounds, and it might not work out. And if we've waited another year and another year, what if he does his ACL minute 1? We've got to wait another year. Like, you have to balance out fixing your problems now and fixing the ones you want to fix long term. And I don't think we've always got that right. And that is where I probably would agree with O'Malley.
I maintain one of my biggest issues why you saw me rant, and I don't rant often, and I ranted on the transfer deadline day. If you're telling me the biggest issues in the team, that's from club top to bottom, is X factor, box efficiency, and you've identified those things as issues, I cannot logic and rationalize in the entire year of 2024, you have found no one on the market that is suitable to fix your needs. That is complete clinical insanity. If you identify a problem and you feel that there are no solutions to it, none, that to me is that there's no longer a conversation. I think
you're looking in the wrong place.
No,
because there are solutions.
So yes, like, I agree completely that there's complacency, but at the same token, I don't think that we're aggressive enough in identifying some points of improvement. And I don't think that we're aggressive enough in intent. Like, the whole nature of Arsenal not bidding, I know it's a joke, but to maintain relations, and we're going to monitor, and we're going to do X, Y, and Z. It's a joke, but there is some kind of level of, okay, at some point, ask the girl at the bar out. How many times have I used this analogy? It's about having some aggressive intent. And I think we are so afraid of making a mistake, so we do nothing. You're so afraid of the world, you stay in your house for the rest of your life. Well, what happens if I go out and I get hit by a car? Well, what happens if, I go out and, like, lightning hits me? What happens if I go out and I get an infection? What if? And then at the end of the day, you don't live your life. And that, for me, is just something that pisses me off so much, because we've got to the point where we're allowed to make mistakes. We're so wrong from making a mistake because of how right we have had to be to get back on top.
Yeah. That
it has become a mentality issue within the club that we're so afraid of making mistakes, we do nothing. And
Mate,
that's an issue from top to bottom.
I think I said this. I think I even said this maybe last summer, but certainly end of last year. We're still in so many people are still in project mode in their heads. It's still in every contract has to be perfect and everything. It's like, you can make mistakes. We've got a lot of money. We're a top level team. You can sign a player for £50 million. It doesn't quite work out, and you sell him for £25 million, and you can live. You can live. You will be fine. But then the question is, if you want to win, that's another conversation. Ed, stats mean nothing versus Newcastle. They have us for dinner. They break our play out the back, and they're clinical on the turnover. Saliba and Gabby scared. This is the only game we lose tactically, but we do. And yeah, I've got a stat here. This is the 5th time Arsenal have lost to Eddie Howe's Newcastle in all competitions under Mikel Arteta. Only Pep Guardiola with 9 and Jurgen Klopp have beaten the Spaniard more in his time in charge of the Gunners.
Yeah, no, I kind of mentioned it earlier in the stream. This is a team that we really historically struggle against. And, I would love to know why we have such technical inconsistency. Look, there's context. After such a big moment, this looked like a team that gave it all on the weekend and had nothing the next couple days. You could make that argument, and I don't think that you would be wrong. But the problem is you kind of ignore a lot of the issues that we've seen, not just in this game, but this entire fixture history, right? If you make that comment. So it gets to a point where we need to analyze why in these moments people step up. And I do want to end on a positive, because we've done so many negative parts, but I'm really frustrated why the Hale End boys are sat there with their technical consistency. And, they're example of people that haven't carried the baggage of the last 3 to 4 years in terms of what you're doing. And it's why youth can help you in these moments. But for me, we do need to find some I want to find different technical leaders. I'm just going to flat out and say it. I think we've got some brilliant technical leaders in the back line with our goalkeeper. We've got some really brilliant stuff happening in midfield. I don't think we found enough technical leaders without Bukayo Saka. That's the biggest problem. And, I do want to end on this. I think there was a lot of bullshit from our fans about Bukayo Saka that was said in terms of not acknowledging for me his importance to the team. And, when I look at it, this is a player for me that it's not an excuse because you don't have him that you can't do these things. But I do think without him in the last 2 months, we have really reiterated what he gives us and what the thrust is and where that comes from. And I just hope after this and after all of this issue, in terms of us identifying those things, I hope we start to platform that boy a little bit more than we do. I don't want to see us go back to what we've seen. It is brilliant in terms of what we've seen with the humility we operate with and the collectiveness. I hear all that. But if you want to win, you got to get a little bit more individualistic. We've got to get a little bit more selfish, a little bit more aggressive. And I think that also has to be in how we approach the setup of our team. We need to start sacrificing some things to allow for platforming of some of our better players and our players that we think are most threatening towards goal.
Space Rocky says, with Zubimendi coming and Ethan being here, what is Odegaard's future? Have we discussed that enough for you? Appreciate that. Super chat. Yeah, we'll have a wider conversation as well. Billy Price has said it 3 days ago. Ethan on the right, interchanging with Saka on the right throughout a match would give fits to any team. Those two inside on the right channel. And yeah, maybe what we're saying about individualism. Certainly in the final third. There has to be some kind of change, and it's not just going to be Alexander Isak signs and we click and everything changes. There's going to be some bigger changes, but we'll maybe have that conversation at some point on the podcast. Isak and Ode both hit the post. One turned goal, one didn't. It was a hard game. 2-0 down at their ground. Stop with goldfish memory. Get behind the boys. We are behind the boys. If it is us or the fans, I don't know, but we absolutely are. Look, you can have a bad game. I don't think, we're sat here saying Saliba was poor this evening and Timber was poor this evening and Odegaard didn't have his best game and, all these sorts of things. And Ryan made a big mistake and it was a poor performance. But this is almost the more frustrating part. The greatest club manager of all time this week said Arsenal are the strongest team in all phases and all sort of parts of football in world football. This is an unbelievable coach. And so when there are deficiencies and consistent deficiencies, which we've outlined many, many times, that's a frustration. Doesn't mean he can't fix them. Doesn't mean he shouldn't get time to fix them. Doesn't mean that, he's got everything wrong. It's just that there is frustrations. And I think people are right and valid to bring them up. Louis says, Rice looks like a future captain. Absolutely. Don't disagree with that. I think there was... Even just in sort of, we've talked about, again, you spoke about technical leaders, but just sort of who we want to come to define Arsenal is something we've spoken about, right? And players like Miles and players like Ethan and players like Rice and players like Gabriel, that fight and that consistency and that capacity is absolutely something that I want to come to define Arsenal. Mafio, Arteta never learns, always loses to the same teams. I think that's true of Newcastle. I don't think that's true of City anymore. I think maybe Klopp had his number, but not at the end. Maybe the same types of games. There's an argument there.
For me, it's what I feel the physical mid blocks are something that he consistently struggles with.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Even in Europe, Sporting. Okay, we've done better against Villa specifically, but they were an example of a team that we've struggled against. Fulham as well, another physical mid block. Newcastle as well. There is a consistency to the type of game that Arsenal struggle with. You look at Inter Milan in the Champions League, again, we generated some chances, but we struggled to really go into that match. I don't agree with Brighton, with people saying that. I think Brighton we do well against. We just had really poor calls there. But again, it doesn't detract from the main point. We're looking at a pattern. It is the one game pattern that I really feel has credence. Physical mid blocks we need to address. Yeah. And I think personnel can help us there, but also some intent, right? I do think, look, two things can be true. And part of the problem is when you have these discussions, and I wanted to speak on the previous thing about getting behind the boys. You can say that this was the worst performance of the season and still believe in a team. You can still criticize and say that Martin Odegaard, for me, has struggled and really had a really poor season, but believe he should be part of the squad and be important. Like, it's not this, there isn't binary thinking here. Like, you can criticize, you can praise, and at the same token have another overarching feeling that doesn't mean that you don't believe in the squad. Like, we need to start getting a little bit more open to having some more nuanced conversations, because again, today will rightfully be a negative instant reaction for what is a very poor performance. There's nothing to
we went out of the Carabao Cup. What do you think?
Yeah, we're out of the Carabao. It's not going to be okay, it's time to get behind the boys. No, like, it's a poor day. Analyze what happened to get wrong, find solutions. Let's talk about solutions and move on, from the next game. But yeah, I think that I don't think it's fair. It's almost gaslighty. Yeah, like, it's almost gaslighty for me to say that you're not allowed to criticize a team after a poor performance. You are.
It's the internet, George. Losing battle. George Cole says, I am Kai. George, you don't look like Kai on your profile picture, I'll be honest, but thank you very much for the super chat. San Lino says, why didn't we go with Sesko and Watkins at the same time in early January, similar to Al Nassr with Boniface and Durant rather than one at a time? We did it like almost an hour on a stream the other day talking about our transfer things, so you can maybe go check that out. Appreciate the super chat. But yeah, I mean, many questions about this window. Absolutely. Harish, we came to that. Thank you so much. Nicholas says, Newcastle 4-4 was my 16th birthday 13 years ago today, which makes today your 29th birthday, Nicholas. Happy birthday. Thank you for the super chat. Thank you. I had a little moment when you were talking, I was adding up. Anurag says, the more I watch Isak, the more I'm sure he won't be signing for us. I think Liverpool will be in for him as well. Look, if I'm Isak, firstly, I watched his sticker book thing on Sky earlier, and he said the goal he scored against us was his favourite goal of the season. And I don't know, I think he's got a bit of a thing with Henry and the number 14. I think there's something there. We still got that juice, just about. But surely if you're Isak's representatives and Arsenal have the money and they're going to pay for you, it makes the most sense. You're going to be a hero at Arsenal. A hero, and you go and you guaranteed with this team who is still, no one wants to hear this, but are still a young team with Saka at 24 and Rice at 25, whatever. You still are growing in that team, and I think you absolutely can go and do that. So maybe he does go to Liverpool. I don't think that's the sort of Liverpool signing to me. It doesn't feel like a Liverpool signing, and it feels like more of like an us signing, to be honest.
I do think that there's more of a debate to be had. Okay, I'm going to ask you a question more instead of going on a big rant about it. I think obviously Arsenal are big favorites for that type of move if we have the money, right? Like, we've pretty much recruited his past team. There's no way that he looks at that and say that doesn't make sense. That's so stupid from me. But I do want to ask you, like, you go into the summer, 130 million pounds is the price. Like, I don't think it'll be less. Like, we can argue to the cows come home, but it's a big freaking price. It is 120 million pounds, no matter what. In my opinion, he's got 3 years left. This is the best striker in the world on form right now. That's the kind of money you're looking at. Okay, Declan, the best DM was 100. The striker is at least 20 million pounds more, very least. If he's available for that kind of money, is that worth that decision as opposed to two very good options? That for me is a more interesting debate.
Yeah, to me, it literally depends on the budget. It depends on if we're able to go, I would say, if we're able to get the rest of our needs done and go and do the Isak thing. I'll be real. I think it could be a touch cheap. It will still be over £100 million. I think it depends on whether Newcastle get UEFA Champions League football, and it depends whether he pushes, and he might. It will be over 100 million, but as in, I think there's some people who are like, it'll be 180, and I'm like, chill out a little bit. I think it's achievable. I don't think he's on crazy wages. I think he would probably be our highest earner, but that's fair enough. And obviously we'll push Saka up at some point. It's a cop-out answer, but unfortunately, if we went and signed Isak June the 1st for 120 million pounds, I'd be extremely excited, obviously, but I would reserve my judgment a little bit is if we went and did nothing else. Then I'd say, I don't know if we addressed all the issues in the squad. If we did that, plus the versatile forward, plus the goalkeeper, plus probably the midfielder that we needed, and so on, then I'd say, bloody hell, well done, Cronkies. you clearly do want to win, and we're sailing off into the sunset. But unfortunately, until you see the whole summer, I don't know if I'll be able to answer that.
I know. I think it's just like, let me paint a scenario where you're going to spend 250 million pounds. You have an extra. You have Isak money, that allocation, 120, 130, whatever semantics you want to say, but you have that allocation plus another 100 million pounds. So you're going to do Zubamendi plus another one. Okay, and you've got that. Is it better to basically Isak, Zubamendi, and Semenyo, let's say, and that's your summer?
I love
or
that.
Is it better to Zubamendi, Barcola, Semenyo, Garcia, Agume? Like that is kind of the question. Like I'm putting, it's two very different things. I don't know the right answer right now, but I'm just saying as a mentality, is it better? Are we at the point where we've talked about all these issues that it has to go a little bit beyond logic, and you go out, and whilst you maybe admit that an Isak or one of those people like him aren't worth maybe 120, 130, 140, you go there and you sit there and you say, who gives a shit? Go out, get it done, because we know it's a solution that's guaranteed.
And I think you said it yourself. This is the best striker in the world right now. And if he's available and you can go and do that, and that's an option for us, I think to me, we've signed the best DM in the world. I think we have one of the best goalkeepers in the world. I think we have one of the best centre-back pairings in the world. We may have to wait to add the perfect midfielder, but if we did Zubamendi and Isak, I think we're, I just, if there's a world we can do it, I think you do it for me. But I'm sure we'll discuss that many times. Kieran 52, our last 2 wins out of 7 with Jorginho starting. Yeah, absolutely. I think Jorginho should have been a shoe-in for this evening. Ultra Pro Gamer with that profile picture. Arteta can't make Odegaard score that chance. No, agree. Absolutely. And the players have to take responsibility, and hopefully we've said that. Nathan Piper, what do we think about our scouts? Do you think there's some mischievous money saving with the fact City can get the players they got, and we are linked with is limelight players? Not quite sure what you mean by limelight players.
I don't think the way that City spent their money is correct. I think that they really misspent, and that reeked more of desperation than logical stuff to me. The one thing I will say, we need to be more flexible about the types of players we recruit. As a fan base, as a club, and this idea that so-and-so has a fault, therefore there's no chance, it's stupid to suggest not having them, has to get out of our brains and out of our thinking. That I completely agree with. There are players out there that will fix us, and they aren't just Nico Williams and Sesko, for example. That we need to have a more open mind for the type of solutions that we're going to have.
And we've improved by having that flexibility before. Like by pivoting to Trossard, by pivoting to Jorginho, by pivoting to players before, we have improved. We've even Zinchenko, it got us further down the line. Do you know what I mean? Without us getting the first choice targets. But it feels like with the forward target, instead of pivoting, we've just gone, well, we just won't do it then. It's like, why? Very weird thing to do. Sean, what? It's like, well, I can't go to Waitrose, so I just won't. I'll just starve. You won't get that reference because you're Canadian, but it's a very nice supermarket. Sean Whitehurst says Odegaard was clinical in 22-23 from those positions. How much of this is form versus different tactics and build-up versus different left 8 profile? Yeah, I think Rice has spoken about this in terms of those arrivals into those areas, and apparently Mikel's been on at them about that. I don't know. I think honestly, this is maybe going into the Odegaard conversation. I think Odegaard might have a little bit too much freedom in this system and might be able to say, actually, do you know what I'm going to do? I'm Martin Odegaard. I'm your captain. I'm going to come and drop deep. And actually, sometimes you need to just focus on scoring goals, buddy, and not dropping out the block and not being that guy. And I wonder how much of it is Mikel giving freedom versus instruction. I don't know.
I would love to. I really feel that we should have an Odegaard.
Yeah,
the three of us have a topic of conversation.
Should we do a scouted?
Yeah, we should, because when you're talking about the clinical portion from that period, mate, where did he play? Where was the priority of the 22-23 season in which you're talking about Odegaard being clinical in those positions? For me, he was the middle third controller. We started out with him as a number 10, higher up the pitch for the first 2 months of that season, and he struggled. We moved him back, and the reason he was getting those goals, in my opinion, is the distance that he has to run and his ability to ghost and find movement, but have the space to run into, is why he was successful in terms of finishing those positions. When he's high up the pitch and he's forced to find space whilst already in the final third, he's much less clinical in those positions. He's much less able to create consistency in his actions in those positions. And that's an Odegaard con, right? But that's not the type of player he is. So if you're talking about this, for me, is where the comparison, is not correct with the context. He's clinical from those positions because he's got the space to arrive into, for me. And he's a lot more free in terms of arriving to finished than finished whilst high. And that's a very big difference to me.
Yeah, I think something isn't right. And I also think in this conversation we need to talk about that next step and those distances and where he stands, because that's a big question. Big Chungus cult member. I'm sure that means something to you Gen Zers. I think I am a Gen Z, just about. What is even the club's project going forward? Win, hopefully. Try and win. Thanks for the super chat. George Cole says next year. You drunk, George? You're right. Final one from Anurag says we need a striker and a winger. Partey, Jorginho going, so 2 mids needed. Tierney, Zinni, Kivior leaving, so we need backups. Tommy, unreliable. Need a backup goalkeeper as well. That is 6 to 7 signings without even looking at upgrades in the 11. There's a lot to potentially do. I mean, I always say, I think we've had discussions before, like you can give yourself a very long to-do list, or you can give yourself a very short to-do list. Depends on if you want to move on from certain players. You could ask Jorginho to stay another year. You could ask Partey for another year. You could keep Tierney, Zinni, and Kivior around. You can give yourself a list. I think the things we absolutely need to do are almost certainly, it's a versatile forward, a centre forward, a midfielder, and a backup goalkeeper. That's the 4 things that I think are non-negotiable, and then the rest are kind of, I think, situational.
Yeah, like that's a lot to me, like to be a minimum. And then the rest is up to you. I mean, the way things are moving, you've got 2 midfielders out and potentially Lokonga. That's a question. You look at the window, Zinchenko unlikely to be involved, Kieran Tierney out, Nuno Tavares out on an obligation. Do you need another left-sided player with 3 going out? I don't know. I'm asking the question. You talk about your Tomiyasu, and if you want to move on from that situation in the squad, you ask to sell, but then you need to buy to replace that profile. The whole idea of Emile and Fabio Vieira being out of the squad and then not replacing that type of player within the squad. Like there are consequences to sales that we may want. Like you can believe that the team has to move on from a certain player, but then when you start selling these, you've got to replace the profiles within the squad, and that's when it's a feasibility question. That's kind of the crux of why I ask, is it better to Isak, Zubimendi, Semenyo, 3 guarantees that or to fill out a squad and get rid of things? But that means keeping players that you can't rely on and are going to be holes, right? Like that's a consequence of accepting that Isak type of window. Like you have to rely on Tomiyasu. You will have to do that at some point in the season. You're looking at that type of window. You will have to rely on Declan Rice being fit. You will, because you've only got Zubimendi. And I don't think there's a right answer, right? Like I'm not sat here saying I'm convinced.
You're gambling whatever way. If you sign a player, you're gambling because you're gambling on that player. So
yes, yeah. So it's just about minimizing what gamble you feel is right, and about identifying the problems that you really want to identify. The only thing I will say that's a non-negotiable and has been for over 2 years on this channel is bingo, transitional inevitability. I want that fixed in the squad. I want us to change our turnovers into shots consistently. And if we can do that, that's my biggest change in our Football Club.
And just to answer the super chat from George, Liverpool Isak can run into space. But again, I think signing Isak will allow us to play differently with space. I think that's the key part. Final one from iJin009 says, any updates on sporting director? I feel like that should be addressed ASAP. Well, I know Mikel was asked about it this morning, and he said something along the lines of this is going to be sorted soon. He said, I'm not sure. I think he said something like, I don't know if it will be Jason or somebody else, but it will be sorted soon. So I think that will be happening soon.
I do think the quotes were interesting. That's another pod question. Did you read the article, right?
What article?
the article that came from, like when he was talking about the sporting directors, because it was
it was just in his presser.
Yeah, there was a little bit more from the Standard that had blown up, and he talked about Edo in terms of having him around since Edo left, and there was a little bit more that he went into, at least in the quotes that I saw from the Standard.
Is it the embargoed bit?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we should go through that at some point.
Yeah, sure.
There's visible frustration. I'll maintain, I think it's pretty poor by the club to have known that Eddie was leaving back in August and to have not had advanced on a candidate. Yeah. If we were looking for a summer, right, typically your plans to draw up those plans are now, and you begin identifying plan A's and B's and starting initial conversations in March in preparation for the summer. I'm sure we have a short list. I'm sure it's close, but the fact that we haven't advanced, knowing that Edu left in August, for me is poor.
Do we know for sure that they knew Edu was leaving August? Because when he left in November, it sounded like it was more of a shock than.
Because the first links to the Nottingham Forest and the Marinakis thing happened in August to me, which I think if media is really late, personally. Like, I think behind the scenes, there was some conversations that he knew that it was likely that they were going to go. Yeah. And I mean, it got confirmed in September, not really November, right? Like, he had gardening leave till November, but it was confirmed he was gone.
No. It was confirmed. It was kind of confirmed he was gone in November. I think there might have been rumors. It just depends when they knew. And they might have known a year ago. And if they knew a year ago, then I'm more angry. But I don't know. It's difficult to tell, isn't it? Yeah, we'll chat about the sporting director at some point. We'll chat about Odegaard at some point. We'll chat about all those things. But for now, we'll leave it there. Thank you for being here. We had a rewatch out of the City game. If you want to go cheer yourself up, you can go watch that. We did a rewatch of the 5-1. Arsenal off to Dubai. Now we've got a pod coming out. Main pod will be back on the Monday. We've got a TCB live tomorrow. Yeah, all that good stuff. Look, really frustrating evening. I have to say, even though I had a bit of optimism before the game, I felt as though this was always going to be tough, and it was tough, but I was more frustrated by the performance, to be honest. I think it was always going to be tough, but we didn't perform at the level that we know we can, and that's really annoying. I think we have now an opportunity to reset. We have an opportunity to go again. An opportunity to get some players fresh and fit. I think Arteta's come out, just sort of skimming through some comments here, and Arteta's saying that he didn't think we were fit, and I think he's probably right on some level. It's time to reset. We joke about Dubai, but it is time to reset and focus fully on the Premier League and the Champions League, and get the group together, get the group back. Hopefully, Saka back as soon as possible. Keep our players fit, and just go game by game. Frustrating, but here we are.
Yeah, I just think, like, you don't excuse the type of performance that you see today. It's really frustrating. There's a lot of the only positives that I can see, again, were some of the Hale End boys, especially Miles and Ethan. Thought they brought a lot to the game, and I thought Calafiori had a good cameo. And I think other than that, I'm really searching for positives in a day that I think just the team, the club, and everybody feels let down. It's just a really poor performance, but you take this on the chin. We try to identify some patterns. We identify solutions, and we move from there. This idea for me is that you just don't let this define you. And I don't think that it's fair that the season's a write-off. I'm really against mentality like that. Like, I'm about making sure that we learn from our mistakes, trying to identify those, and moving on from them. And that's as simply as what it is. I think a reset, people get annoyed with the wording of it, but it's about saying, well, when you've done something so poor, try to change what you've done, and that can be difficult to hear on a difficult night, which is fine.
Yep. 10 days, Dubai. My sister lives there. It's very nice. Been there a few times. They'll have a lovely time. Thank you, George.
Thank you, good sir. Thank
you all for being here. Thanks for watching, and we'll be fine. Long term, we will be fine. Thanks for watching, and thanks for keeping it Arsenal.
Tens of thousands of football fans came to Highbury. Electrifying.